Today is September 18th, 2000. The time is 9:13 a.m. Would the court reporter please swear in the witness?
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
The counsel will now introduce themselves for the record.
I'm Rick Forman for the plaintiff, Owens Corning.
Jack Baldwin, the plaintiff.
Robbie Cox for the plaintiff.
Brian Jackson from Philip Morris and Morillard.
Robert Sasser for R.J. Reynolds. Dan Donahue with R.J. Reynolds.
Charles Blitz with R.J. Reynolds.
Keith Vaughn for R.J. Reynolds.
Okay. Would you state your full name, please?
Andrew J. Schindler,
Mr. Schindler, what is your current occupation?
Chairman and CEO of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Holdings Corporation.
What is the relation between R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Holdings and R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company?
R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Holdings is the parent company of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company.
Is the entity that manufactures and sells cigarettes R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company?
Yes.
If during the course of a deposition I refer to R.J. Reynolds, could we have an understanding I'm referring to R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company then, just to save time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many times have you testified in trial before?
I have to guess a little bit, but between depositions and actual testimony in courtroom, probably about 6, 7 times, something like that.
How about actually in court?
Twice.
And that would be the Minnesota case?
Yes.
And Engle?
Yes.
Have you given a deposition since the Engle appearance?
No, I haven't.
Do you intend to appear live at the trial of this case as a witness?
That hasn't been determined yet.
Mr. Schindler, are you able to identify any consumer product in the history of mankind which has been reported by medical science to have caused more premature deaths than cigarette smoking?
No.
Do you agree that cigarette smoking causes more premature deaths than any other consumer product in the United States?
I agree that cigarettes have significant and inherent risk and may contribute to the development of disease in some people.
Do you agree that it causes more premature death than any other consumer product in the U.S.?
I don't know if it causes more premature death than any other consumer product.
Do you know of any report of any other consumer product which is alleged to cause more deaths than cigarette smoking?
No, I don't.
Are you familiar with the estimates of the expected number of deaths from cigarette smoking on a worldwide basis?
Yes, I'm somewhat familiar with those, yes.
What is the figure you're familiar with?
Well, in the United States, the estimates tend to be around 400,000 worldwide. Well, actually, on a worldwide basis, I'm not sure. I think it's millions. In the U.S., it's typically around 400,000 are the estimates that I've seen.
Do you agree with those estimates?
I am in no position to judge the validity of those estimates.
Have you asked your scientific advisors at the company about the validity of those estimates?
Not specifically the validity of those estimates. We discussed the risk of the product and what to do about the risk of the product, quite frequently.
Do you have any opinion as to the validity of those estimates?
Well, there have been various different studies over time that have questioned the validity of those estimates, but I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not really in a position personally to judge the validity of those estimates.
What are your top 4 brands today?
Winston, Camel, Salem, and Doral.
And how long have those been the top 4 brands?
For a long time. 30 years, 20-some years, very long time.
Are any of those what you would consider, or any among those brands, the leader within those brands, a low-tar cigarette? In other words, is the leading Winston cigarette a low-tar Winston cigarette, or is it what you would call a full-flavor cigarette?
Well, all of those brands have light styles. I would judge that the light styles are the leading share of those brands.
Each of those 4?
Yes, I believe that's correct, yes.
And when you say light, what is your cutoff for milligrams?
Lights generally in a 10, 11 milligrams of tar and below. You have lights, ultralights, so forth.
And what would be ultralight?
Ultralights are in a 6, 7 milligrams of tar, 5, 6, 7.
What is your understanding of the percentage of persons with lung cancer who have a history of smoking?
I'm not exactly sure on that. The percentage of people with lung cancer that have a history of smoking, I'd only be guessing there. I mean, the things that I'm familiar with is that if you smoke, you have a 10 or so times greater risk of getting lung cancer. The exact percentage of people who smoke who have lung cancer, I'm not sure.
Well, the question is, of people who have lung cancer, what percentage of those people are smokers? That's what
I'm not sure.
Have you ever discussed that with your scientific advisors?
Not in those terms that I can recall.
Have you seen figures that you would consider reliable in the range of 85 to 90% or greater?
I don't exactly remember that. I mean, it vaguely sounds familiar to me, yes.
Do you have any estimate of the percentage of persons with lung cancer who are non-smokers?
Percentage? No, could you ask me that again?
Yeah, percentage of people who have lung cancer who have no history of smoking.
I'm not sure of that number.
Is that something you've discussed with your scientific advisors?
I imagine we have somewhere along the line.
Do you have any estimate of the percentage of people who smoke at least 1 pack per day for 20 years who have no ill effects at all from smoking?
I don't know what that percentage is.
Have you discussed that with your scientific advisors?
No.
Do you have any estimate of the risk of premature death of a smoker who smokes your Winston, Camel, Salem, or Doral cigarettes, who would begin smoking before the age of 20 and continues to smoke for, say, 40 years?
No, I don't.
Do you have any data which you consider to be reliable, which indicates more than 20% of smokers began to smoke on a regular basis before the age of 21?
Ask me that again, please.
What is your understanding of the percentage of smokers who began to smoke on a regular basis before age 21?
Well, my understanding, it's just generally written about periodically, is that the high percentage of people who smoke have started, the estimates are before age 21, like 80% or so, is what I've read or heard about in various reports.
Have you discussed that with any of your advisors at the company, scientific or otherwise?
No.
You've never had any discussion with anyone at RJ Reynolds about what percentage of people start smoking before age 21?
Well, you cast that originally as like sit down in a room and specifically address that subject. I think it's been commented on as it's commented on when it's written about, but I've not sat down in a meeting and had a specific agenda item where we're talking about at some length about the percentage of people who start smoking before age 21.
At any meetings of your stockholders, have you advised them of your expected plan or your plan to reduce teenage smoking?
I believe in the last, in the shareholders meeting which we had in April, which was our first one, we've talked about underage smoking and our Right Decisions Right Now program and We Card and our efforts to address underage smoking.
When was the first time that was addressed to your stockholders?
I'm not sure. We were spun off in June of '99, and we had our first shareholders meeting in 30-some years as RJ Reynolds Tobacco Holdings in April, and it was addressed, as I recall, in that meeting. Prior to that, I'm just not sure.
If it was ever addressed?
Yeah, it may have been. I'm just when it was RJR and Nabisco, I'm just not clear in my head about it being addressed.
Do you recall ever addressing the issue of teenage smoking with your stockholders before April of this year?
I do not specifically recall. It may have been in a presentation I gave 2 years ago.
Have you advised your stockholders that if your efforts to reduce teenage smoking is successful, that your market share will decline?
No.
Do you believe it will decline?
I have no idea. I don't, in fact, if it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's not a consideration on my part or the company's part in addressing underage smoking as to whether or not our market share would decline if those efforts among ourselves and other folks to reduce underage smoking are successful.
Would you anticipate that your gross revenue would substantially decline if everyone under 21 were to stop smoking?
I've never done an analysis like that. The issue here is that if you're underage, you shouldn't be smoking, and we have efforts, as well as other companies and public health officials, to address underage smoking. What the reduction of underage smoking, I think it would be great for us, great for the industry. The elimination of it would be terrific. What impact it might have on revenues and earnings, I have no idea. I've never done that kind of analysis, never really broached that subject. It would be whatever it would be.
Well, if 80% of people start smoking before age 21, and your program were successful to the extent that all of those people were to refrain from smoking in the future, wouldn't you agree that you would lose about 80% of your smokers?
Well, what you're talking about here is a theory where if nobody starts smoking, you're saying before 21, typically this theory is before age 18. If everybody stopped smoking before age 18, that virtually nobody would be smoking, and I don't know that to be true. If that's what happened, if kids stopped smoking and the volume went away, then the volume would go away.
And you have no estimates from your advisors at the company of what effect this would have on your gross sales?
No.
Never discussed it?
Never.
Do you recall making a statement in June of 1999 that I don't know how big the industry will be in 25 or 30 years from now, but it will be substantial and profitable business to be in?
I don't recall June of '99, but I do recall, saying that at various times.
Do you believe that's still to be the case?
Yeah, I think the industry will, at some level, be around, and it'll be profitable. And for those who can compete inside of that industry, it'll be a profitable business.
And do you have a business plan to address how you will replace smokers if nobody smokes after age 21?
No.
But you still say it will be a profitable business?
My estimate, in looking at the industry, it doesn't appear that cigarette smoking is going away anytime soon, that the industry has declined substantially. Since 1982, it's declined about 30%. It's declined 13-14% in the last couple of years. It appears that people will continue to smoke at some level, although substantially less than it's been in the past, and it is my belief that if we can compete effectively and responsibly in that segment, that it'll be a profitable business.
Do you in fact assume that despite your efforts to reduce teenage smoking, or what you say your efforts to reduce teenage smoking, that teenagers will in fact continue to smoke and will be a part of the business that your company relies on to sustain its growth in the future?
We make no efforts to market to teenagers or underage kids who have smoked. We do not focus on that. We do not discuss it. We do not make estimates about the future based on that. There are a tremendous amount of efforts. We have some. The other companies have some. Public health officials have a lot of efforts. Since the MSA, there are tremendous efforts on underage smoking. And those efforts by everybody involved are intended to be successful. Time will tell as to whether or not they're successful.
Do you have any business assumptions as to whether in fact they will be successful?
No.
Do Do you know at the present time what percentage of the sales of RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company are to persons under 21 years of age?
No, I don't.
Is that data available?
It might be. It might be between 18 and 21 within the company. Underage smoking numbers, below 18 are collected by different agencies, not by the company. So there's no, I suppose if you ask somebody to go into government studies and things like that, somebody could divine some number, but I don't know what it is, and I don't ask for that kind of data, and we don't do that kind of data.
Is it your position that RJ Reynolds as a company does not have information as to the percentage of smokers that use its brands who are under age 21?
We do not generate that data. There are studies periodically done by public health officials about that.
Do you track that data? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Do we track that data?
Yes.
We're aware of that data. I mean, people publish that data. It's public knowledge.
Well, then do you know what percentage of people who smoke your brands are under age 15?
No, I don't.
Under age 18?
No.
Is that information available?
I don't know. I've never asked for it.
Do you track that data?
We do not. You mean the data that public health officials and other outside studies do?
Yes.
We're aware of that data. Yes, it's public information. It's published.
But you don't know what the numbers are
No.
today? What is the share point in the market worth now?
In terms of operating income, a share point would probably be worth about, you have to roughly estimate this, probably about $200 million in operating income, and net income would be roughly half of that.
Has that figure increased or decreased in the last 5 years? That is, what a share point is worth.
Well, it's probably increased because of all these price increases that have come into play in the last 3 years, for extremely high price increases because of the MSA agreement. So while there have been but you have to understand there have been volume declines, our earnings have gone down 37%, but the value of a share point, because of those big price increases to meet the MSA payments, have probably gone up in terms of dollar value. But volume's gone down and earnings have gone down for us.
For how many years have your earnings declined?
The earnings declined from 98 to 99 by about 37%.
How about before 98?
Between 97 and 98, ongoing earnings, as I recall, were up.
Have they declined at any point before 1998?
Yeah, declined dramatically from 1992 to 1993 after Marlboro Friday. The operating earnings at that point, prior to Marlboro, well, in 1992, were about $2.2 billion, and they went down to $1.2 billion after Marlboro Friday, which was a price rollback that occurred in April of '93.
After 1993 and up to 1998, did you have an increase in earnings every year?
From 93 through 98, I am not sure if there was an increase every year. I think there was every year.
And what were your earnings in 1998?
The ongoing estimate, because there was a lot going on relative to MSA and so forth, I believe the ongoing estimate was around $1.6 billion.
How would that compare to 1997?
It's up 50, 100 million. I'd have to look at numbers. I mean,
So in the range of 1.4 to 1.5 billion for 97?
I believe that's right.
How about starting in 1990? Could you give me the estimate?
1990. Well, between 1990 and 1992, the earnings were in this 2.2 billion range, which I mentioned earlier. Then in '93, they went to 1.2 billion as a function of Marlboro Friday and the price rollback that occurred with Marlboro Friday.
Do you expect earnings for 1999 to be greater than for 1998?
Our guidance for the whole year is that our earnings for this year would be consistent with 1999.
Now, the 1.6 billion was for 1998, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have the 1999 figure?
The net income was, well, on the same comparison with operating company contribution, as we call it, was $1,275,000,000, with net income at, as I recall, about $369 million.
What were your gross sales in 1998?
We had a rapid, I'm going to qualify this a little, because we had a rapid growth in gross revenues because of the MSA payments and all these price increases. In '99, there were about $7.5 billion. In 1998, I'm not totally sure, but probably about, I'm going to have to guess a little, probably about $6.9 billion.
Do you expect the year 2000 earnings to be greater than 1999? I'm sorry, gross sales to be greater than 1999?
They'll be greater, likely be greater because of the continued price increases for the MSA.
So you would anticipate they would be greater than 7.5 billion?
Yes, because of price increases.
To this day, has R.J. Reynolds ever paid an individual smoker for any illness claimed to be due to smoking?
No.
Could you describe any circumstance under which R.J. Reynolds would be willing voluntarily to compensate a smoker who uses your cigarettes and suffers a premature death due to smoking?
Can I conceive of any circumstance where you voluntarily pay somebody who smokes a risky product that they are aware is risky? No.
Is it your position that each and every smoker who has ever contracted a disease caused by smoking made a voluntary choice with full knowledge and appreciation of all the risk inherent in smoking?
Well,
Go ahead. I just want to get an objection on the record.
Okay, could you ask the question again, please?
Is it your position that each and every smoker who has ever contracted a disease due to smoking smoked with full knowledge and appreciation of all the risk inherent in smoking?
Objection.
I believe that people who smoke, including myself, are fully aware and have been for a long, long time of the health risk associated with smoking. There have been warnings on the packs for over 30 years. You know, I grew up as a kid in the 50s and 60s, and I was aware of the risks of smoking. 30-some years of warning labels. I think people are broadly and clearly aware of the risk of smoking, and you know, when they engage in the behavior to smoke, they are aware of those risks, just as I am as a smoker.
And just to be clear for the record, though, it's your position that each and every smoker is aware of all of the risk inherent in smoking?
Well, I can't absolutely certify each and every smoker. There's millions and millions, but it's inconceivable to me that in our society today, and over the years, that people who smoke would be unaware of the risks of smoking. Between the warning labels, all the various articles that are written about the risk of smoking, every time you visit a doctor, almost the first comment or question out of their mouth is, "Do you smoke?" All the efforts in schools and so forth regarding smoking and its risk, and that you shouldn't smoke. It's just hard for me to imagine who would not be aware of the risks of smoking.
Do you contend, Mr. Schindler, that there's any threshold number of cigarettes that someone may smoke below which there's no risk of contracting a smoking-related disease?
I don't know of some threshold. Smoking is risky, has significant inherent risk, and I don't know of any threshold below which you would say smoking has no risk.
Do you contend that there's any such thing as a safe cigarette?
No, I don't believe there's any such thing as a safe cigarette. If it's a cigarette and it's something that you light and causes combustion and that you inhale, the notion of a safe cigarette to me does not, based on my knowledge of this, fit that model of a product.
Tell me each and every risk a smoker incurs when they make the decision to smoke.
Each and every risk?
Yes.
Well, cigarette smoking has inherent, significant inherent health risks. So there's increased risk of lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and a host of other diseases that the medical community, public health people write about.
Anything else?
No, I mean, significant inherent health risks.
What about addiction?
Oh, addiction? If you engage in smoking behavior, it's a behavior that can be difficult to quit.
Do you believe smoking is addicting?
In the everyday term that's used today, addiction, certainly cigarettes would meet that category. I don't believe they're like heroin and cocaine and hard drugs in terms of that form of addiction.
Are you aware that the Surgeon General disagrees with your position on that with respect to comparing smoking to heroin and cocaine and its addiction qualities?
Yes, I am aware of that, but I just do not believe that cigarettes meet the pattern of addiction that is like heroin and cocaine or alcoholic or that type of thing. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Which scientific advisors do you rely upon for that opinion?
Well, I rely on my R&D staff.
And who in
particular? Gary Berger's our head of R&D, Bob Suber, Don DeBathese, Dave Townsend, John Robinson, who has done a lot of work on addiction.
And they all say that cigarette smoking is not like heroin and cocaine in terms of its addictive qualities.
I believe that would be their judgment, yes.
Do you know of any independent medical authorities who take that position?
I cannot name specifically, but I believe there are some. I remember within the last couple of years that there was a researcher at Wake Forest Medical School here being interviewed on the radio that analogized cigarettes to being more like caffeine and coffee as opposed to hard drugs. I believe there have been other scientists worldwide that have that opinion.
Can you name any public health agencies or authorities who've agreed with that position?
No.
Anywhere in the world?
Not at this moment, I can't know.
You've now testified, you've said, in 6 or 7 cases, including depositions and trial.
Yes.
Did you review that testimony before your appearance here today?
No, I didn't.
In thinking back on that testimony that you've given in the past, are you aware today of any testimony you've given in a smoking-related lawsuit which you now would concede to be erroneous?
No. No, I can't think of anything.
You stand by everything you've said thus far in every other testimony you've given in a smoking-related case?
Yes.
To what extent have you become familiar with the issue of African Americans and the health effects of smoking?
To what extent have I become familiar?
Yes, with the health risk sustained by African Americans from smoking.
Objection.
Well, African Americans as well as Caucasians and Hispanics and any nationality would have exposure to health risks as a function of smoking behavior.
Are you aware of any scientific reports which have indicated that African Americans have a risk of lung cancer that's 50% in excess of that for whites?
No, I don't think I'm familiar with that I can recall.
Have you ever discussed this issue with your scientific advisors? That is, whether African Americans have an increased risk of lung cancer as compared to whites?
No, I haven't.
Are you aware of that issue being discussed within your company by your scientific advisors?
No, I'm not aware of it.
If you were convinced that it was true that African Americans had a higher risk of lung cancer in the range of 50% as compared to whites, and that cigarette smoking was a substantial factor in causing that increased risk, would you cease to market cigarettes to African Americans?
Objection.
Cigarette smoking has significant inherent risks that I believe everybody who smokes is aware of, whether it's African Americans or Caucasians or Hispanics or Asians. And we, people who, including myself, who engage in smoking behavior, are aware of those risks. We market to franchise and competitive smokers regardless of race in this marketplace with this legal product. And so it's hard for me to understand the nature of your question. Would we cease to market to African Americans? Cigarettes are marketed to smokers who choose to smoke, and cigarettes are available to people who choose to smoke.
So the fact that if they had a higher risk of lung cancer due to smoking that was 50% greater than whites, and you knew that and accepted it and believed it, it would make no difference in your marketing efforts toward African Americans, would it?
Well, you're raising a very theoretical question here that I don't know, and I don't think you know. And then you're asking me, if this highly theoretical thing were true, would you stop marketing cigarettes to African Americans? We make a product that has significant and inherent risk. We market this product responsibly to adult smokers who choose to smoke. And your theory to me seems to me to be completely out of the air, and you're telling me that somehow we'd stop marketing discreetly to African Americans where we don't market discreetly to African Americans. We market to all people regardless of race who are adults who choose to smoke. And we continue to do that, and I think in a responsible way with this product.
Do I understand you to be saying it's your opinion that the theory that African Americans have a 50% higher lung cancer risk than whites is out of the air?
Objection.
I am not familiar with the data that you are talking about here.
Have you ever investigated the issue?
Specifically as to African Americans being at a greater risk of disease than other people who are at risk of disease who smoke? No.
Have you ever directed anybody in your company to investigate that issue?
No.
Is it your opinion then that nobody, to your knowledge, that R.J. Reynolds would be aware of that if it's the case?
Objection.
No, that's not my opinion. You asked me if I ever directed anybody to investigate that, and I said no. As to what somebody may believe or their or around that particular issue, I don't know what it is. You just asked me if I have directed anybody, and I said I haven't.
You have people who review the Surgeon General reports when they come out, don't you?
Sure.
You know that one came out in 1998 on smoking among ethnic minorities.
Yes.
You know the issue of lung cancer among African Americans was addressed in the report, don't you?
I'm somewhat aware of that. I did not study the report.
And no one has ever told you that African Americans have a higher lung cancer risk than whites due to smoking?
Objection.
I have not sat in a room with my R&D folks and talked about that issue. I make a product, we market a product that has significant risk to smokers. We acknowledge that risk, and in the context of marketing this product, we believe we do it in a responsible way. In addition, we've devoted substantial resources to trying to figure out how to reduce the risk of this product. And beyond that focus, it's in terms of dealing in a responsible way and working to reduce the risk, that is, to me, is the most fundamental efforts that we have.
Has RJR funded any studies to determine whether African Americans are at a higher health risk from smoking than whites?
I am not aware of any studies like that.
Ever?
I am not aware of any studies.
Do you plan to initiate any such studies now that I've raised the issue today?
No.
Objection.
No, we don't.
Were you employed at R.J. Reynolds in 1990?
Yes.
Are you familiar with what's been known as the Uptown controversy?
Yes.
Do you admit that R.J. Reynolds marketed the Uptown cigarette specifically to blacks?
Well, Uptown, as I recall, ended up never being marketed.
Was the intent, I'm sorry, was the intent then?
But I need to clarify that it never made it to market.
All right, let's take that first. Uptown never made it to market.
That's right.
Was the intent of R.J. Reynolds to market that cigarette to blacks?
I think so. As far as I know, I was not in marketing or in this position, obviously, at the time. That is my understanding. But it never made it to test market.
Do you know why it didn't make it to market?
My recollection is that it became, controversial. That originally some folks, and this is just my recollection, went to Philadelphia, which I believe was to be the test market, and laid out the proposition to various leaders in the African American community, and there were, my understanding is, there were no issues at that point in that time. And then I believe Dr. Lewis Sullivan, who was the Surgeon General, as I recall, at that time, gave a speech at the University of Pennsylvania. Subsequent to that, it became very controversial, and the company decided not to go to test market with that product.
Did R.J. Reynolds withdraw the product because of what has been described as a firestorm in the African American community about this cigarette being targeted toward African Americans?
It is my understanding that the product was withdrawn because of the controversy that emerged about the product and how it was targeted or intended for African Americans.
Did R.J. Reynolds, to your knowledge, ever deny to Dr. Sullivan or to anybody else that African Americans were at a higher risk of lung cancer from smoking than whites?
Did anybody at Reynolds ever deny that?
Yes.
Not that I know of.
Are you familiar with the fact that he wrote a letter to Mr. Johnson at Reynolds in January of 1990 in which he alleged that blacks had a higher rate of lung cancer due to smoking?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
You've never seen the letter?
No.
Did you ever see any reply by R.J. Reynolds to Dr. Sullivan's letter?
No.
Are you aware of any denial by R.J. Reynolds at any time in any place that African Americans had a higher risk of lung cancer due to smoking than whites?
I'm not aware of any denial.
Are you aware of any marketing campaigns by R.J. Reynolds directed toward white-collar professional African Americans specifically?
White-collar professional African Americans?
Yes.
None that I can think of. Can you?
First of all, before I go into that further, do you agree that in fact R.J. Reynolds has attempted to market cigarettes to persons under 21 years of age in the past?
No, under 21?
Yes.
You're talking about under 21 or under 18?
Under 21 first.
But up until 1992, the company, when they would develop, be working on developing ad campaigns or promotions, and you run focus groups where you get franchise and competitive smokers in there to comment on whatever the idea is. There were 18 to 20-year-olds, I believe, at some point in some of those focus groups. Since '92, we don't talk to anybody under age 21. So I would, say somewhere in the, the marketing to somebody who's of legal age under 21, I'm sure has gone on. So
You're familiar with the fact that the cigarette advertising code was voluntarily adopted by the industry in 1964.
yes.
Was a part of that code designed to prevent marketing of cigarettes to persons under 21 years of age?
I believe that's right.
Did RJ Reynolds violate their promise not to market to persons under 21 years of age after 1964?
I'm not sure. I know that the policy on focus groups and the development of marketing campaigns changed, and I think it was 1992, so that the company could ensure in the development of marketing programs that there was no interaction with people under the age of 21 in the development of marketing programs, and I know that that took place in 92.
Do you deny that Reynolds specifically marketed to persons under 21 years of age after 1964 and intentionally did so?
I can neither confirm or deny that. You're talking 36 years ago, and I'm in no position to answer that question covering an expanse of 36 years going back to 1964. And I didn't even join the company until 1974.
Mr. Schindler, I'm going to hand you a document dated March 16, 1962 on the stationery of RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company.
You said 62?
I'm sorry, 1992, March 16, 1992. From Tom Griscom to Mr. Preston Kirk. Have you seen this document before?
Well, I need to look at it. I don't think so, not by the cover page, but go into the inside of it.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm on the inside.
Having looked at it, do you recall whether you've seen it before?
No, I haven't.
Do you agree that this document indicates that RJ Reynolds, in fact, were selling Camel cigarettes to persons between the ages of 12 and 17?
Objection.
No, I don't agree. This document in no way says that. This is a summary of, it says, A, number of smokers under age, 12 to 17, 2.3 million. Percentage of Camels at the bottom bought by underage smokers, 2.3.
What does that tell you?
And then it says, source, National Institute on Drug Abuse. National Institute on Drug Abuse, source. It says to me that, I don't know who Preston Kirk is, but Tom Griscom was our head of external relations, was not in the marketing department. It sounds to me like somebody wanted some information about Camel and underage smoking, and what Tom Griscom sent him was information from the National Institute on Drug Abuse.
Does subparagraph H on page 2 of this letter specifically say that Camels purchased by underage smokers was 0.51 billion?
Paragraph H? I'm sorry, you lost me. Oh. Yes, this data from the apparently from the National Institute of Health, because that's what's footnoted off to somebody who made some request that from our external relations group. And it sounds to me, just based on what you've handed me, is that this is a compilation of data from the National Institute on Drug Abuse.
That indicates that smokers between the age of 12 and 17 purchased at least 500 million Camel cigarettes in the year 1991, doesn't it?
According to this source data, which is not the company, from what I can tell from this report. As I mentioned earlier when you were talking about underage smoking, I said that the company's aware of data that is published by different public health groups regarding underage smoking. This sounds like one of those reports.
Would you mark as Exhibit 1, please? Mr. Schindler, doesn't this letter say that enclosed is a compilation of the Camel market data, which shows the actual business performance? Isn't that correct?
That's what it said.
And it shows that you sold 500 million cigarettes to underage smokers of just the Camel brand in 1 year, doesn't it?
It estimates that based on information from the National Institute on Drug Abuse.
Do you know of any contention by anyone at Reynolds at this time that this information that was submitted in this letter was considered to be unreliable?
I didn't say it was unreliable. I said it's being done for some reason I'm not sure of, certainly not marketing reasons, from the head of external relations back at a point in time where people were attacking Joe Camel, and this information was sent based on calculations, what appears to be out of the data from the National Institute on Drug Abuse.
Now,
In fact, it even says in Section D, calculation A times B times C, and A and B attribute that data to the National Institute on Drug Abuse. So somebody got out a calculator taking information from the National Institute of Drug Abuse and multiplied and got some numbers.
Wouldn't it be a fair interpretation of the letter, Mr. Schindler, that Tom Griscom considered this to be, quote, actual business performance?
Objection.
I don't know. I haven't asked Tommy about this. They made a bunch of calculations off of this data that somebody else collected and estimated, I guess, an estimate of how many cigarettes may have been purchased by underage people based on information out of a government agency.
Do you know of any information that would suggest Mr. Griscom considered this information unreliable?
No.
Start this one next. 1990 marketing. That's the next one down. Mr. Schindler, I'm now going to hand you a document that I'll have marked as Exhibit 2, produced in the Ezell Thomas case by R.J. Reynolds, and I'll ask you if you're familiar with that.
You're asking me if I've seen this document before? I don't think so, that I can recall seeing it.
Let's have that marked as Exhibit 2, and then I'll ask you a few questions about it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Rick, while she's doing that, you need to take a break about every hour, just about 5 minutes or so. So I just want to give you, we haven't been going an hour yet, but I just wanted to tell you ahead of time. So that's okay.
Mr. Schindler, do you have any reason to believe this is not an accurate document from the files of R.J. Reynolds?
Objection.
No, I don't have any reason to believe that.
And the same for Exhibit number 1. Do you have any reason to question the authenticity of this document?
No.
Now, looking at the first actual page of this document, I've just handed you Exhibit 2. Does this discuss a strategy to build shares among younger adult smokers?
Yes.
And to reverse your shares, which were considered to be historically declining among 18 to 20-year-olds?
Yes, that's what it says here.
And your goal was to gain 3.4 points to a share of 17.4% for the year 1990.
Objection. Are you asking if that's what the document says?
Yes.
Or you're now switching to whether this was the goal?
Both.
Well, the document says what you just said.
That was a goal.
Yeah. But I don't know who, I don't think I know who wrote this document. And you're asking me, was this a company goal or my goal? All I know is it's in this document.
If RJ Reynolds had a goal of increasing their market share in the 18 to 20-year-old smokers group, would you agree that would be a violation of the cigarette advertising code that you had agreed to in 1964?
Well, I would agree that it might be. I'm just not totally familiar with that. Again, I mentioned earlier that to whatever degree it was inconsistent with that code or in violation of it in 1992, a policy change was made that no one under the age of 21 could be interacted with regard to the development of marketing programs, either in focus groups or what have you. So to the degree that this implies a violation of the code or is inconsistent with it between those two, I'm not in a position to judge here 10 years after this document.
All right. Look at
knowing who wrote the document.
Look at it's marked page 51 at the bottom, but I think it's the next page in the document. Under strategies,
right.
Does it reflect a strategy to build younger adult smoker share by spending 43% of your total market spending in 1990 on doing so?
That's what it says.
So you, according to this document, RJ Reynolds intended to spend 43% of its entire marketing budget on building a younger adult smoker share. Isn't that correct?
Objection.
No, that's not correct. You can't assume that from this document. All I know is that this is a summary. I do not know that this is what the executive management, the head of marketing, and the CEO of the company at the time agreed to, or is this something that somebody's recommending? To say this was a final direction and 43% of marketing was devoted to younger adult smoker share, I don't know that happened. I can't conclude from this document that that's what the head of marketing and the CEO did.
This document does reflect that was a recommendation to do so, though, wasn't it?
It appears to be, yes.
And the younger adult share they're talking about is ages 18 to 20, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. Here it doesn't say 18 to 20. It says younger adult smoker share. On the previous page it says 18 to 20. They could be talking about 18 to 24. They could be, so I don't know. It just says younger adult smoker share.
Do you see anything in the document that indicates it's talking about an age other than 18 to 20?
Yeah. Page 55.
All right, where is that?
Solidified Magna's position as a younger adult smoker brand that competes directly against Marlboro, increases Magna's share of 18 to 24-year-old male smokers.
All right. Look at the top of the page. Let's talk about Camel. That's the top of page 55. Does this discuss marketing Camel with a single-minded younger adult smoker focus, emphasizing 18 to 20-year-old males?
Yes, it does.
With a single-minded focus. Didn't
That's what
it
it
say that?
says, yes.
Mark, that's exhibit 3. I'm sorry, let me give you that one. I'll give him this one tomorrow. I've just handed you a document, Mr. Schindler, that's marked as Exhibit 3, produced by R.J. Reynolds in the Ezell Thomas case. Have you seen this document before?
Before you answer any questions about that, Rick, are these, I can't read a Bates number on here. These are not Bliley documents.
I mean, I can't imagine they are if you produced it
That's
voluntarily.
I just wanted to be sure, that we can't read the Bates number to do the check we would normally do to check to be sure. So we would reserve our rights in the event it turns out to be, but we assume, as you do, that it's not.
Have you seen that document before, Mr. Schindler?
No, I haven't.
I know.
Do you have any reason to question its being an authentic document?
Not yet.
Well, I don't know. The company provided it, and you'd have to say it's one of our documents, but there's nothing in here identifying dates, when it was put together, who put it together, what it was for. But if it came from the company, I assume it's one of our documents.
Does this document discuss what is described as the menthol phenomenon
Yes,
and the mystique about menthol among blacks?
that's what it says.
And did it say that blacks feel that menthol helps retain the, quote, high, end quote, achieved by drinking wine and other alcoholic beverages and by using drugs?
That's what this says.
Do you feel it's appropriate to exploit the sale of a cigarette under circumstances that it would be used by persons to retain a high after drinking wine or using drugs?
Well, first of all, I would say that whoever did this, whenever they did this, and apparently you don't know who did this, who wrote this, or when it was written, the theory espoused here seems pretty ridiculous to me. If anybody handed this to me today, I'd get real close to throwing them out of the room. No one has ever come to me with anything like this. And so to suggest that somebody took a document that we don't know when it was written, we don't know who wrote it, and we don't know what it was used for, to suggest that the company acted upon this, I think is a real stretch.
You would agree that it would be inappropriate to act on that suggestion, don't you?
I don't think you could. I think it's a crazy theory.
And on the next page of the document, at the bottom of the page, does it indicate, many blacks also state that Cools tastes like a joint and also is the best cigarette to keep a high going?
That's what it says.
Would you agree that it would be inappropriate to market a cigarette in the hope that people would perceive it tastes like a joint, or that it would keep a high going?
First, I think what's stated here is ridiculous, and of course it would be inappropriate. And I don't have any data that the company marketed its cigarettes. Kool is not a Reynolds brand, you understand?
It was a competition for one of your brands, wasn't it?
It's a competitor, yes.
And you were trying to see what brand you could develop to compete against Kool, weren't you?
I wasn't doing anything with this. I don't know when this was written. It was never sent to me. I don't know who wrote it. And I'd appreciate it if you could tell me what the date on this is and who the author is before you can, frankly, give it more credibility than what it's due here. I don't know who wrote this. I don't even know when they wrote it, let alone know what anybody did with it.
What was the cigarette that R.J. Reynolds attempted to develop to compete against Kool?
Well, I don't know of a cigarette attempted to develop or developed an attempt to compete against Kool. Our menthol brand was Salem, and it still is.
Salem was your brand that you thought would compete against Kool, wasn't it?
Well, Salem has been around since the 50s.
Rick, it has been about an hour now. If it's an appropriate stop, if it's...
Okay?
We're going off the record at 10:12. Go back on the record at 10:27 a.m.
Did you mark that as next exhibit? Mr. Schindler, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Exhibit 4, a document dated November 9th, 1967 from George A. Dean, to Mr. J.A. looks like Albanese, A-L-B-A-N-E-S-E. Do you know Mr. Albanese?
Nope.
1967. Does that document appear to be familiar to you?
No.
Do you see that the subject of the document is Camel menthol in the Negro market?
Yes.
If you'll turn to page 2 of the document. First, I'll ask you, do you know who the Dancer Fitzgerald Sample Inc. company is?
They were an ad agency back in the 60s.
For R.J. Reynolds?
I guess so. I did not work for the company then. I was in the Army in November of 1967.
If you turn to page 2 at the second paragraph, does the document reflect Negro DJs, while very popular, are known to be paid for what they say, as are Negro athletes, entertainers, and local personalities, and therefore are suspect when they give product endorsements? Do you know whether R.J. Reynolds had a marketing plan or policy of using persons to make product endorsements in this time period?
Okay, let me stop right there. You were really asking 2 questions.
All right,
Rick.
go ahead.
The first one was, did it say what
Yes,
was quoted
okay.
here? And then you went straight
I'm
into the other
sorry.
one. If you just break
Do you agree that that is what it said?
Yes, that's what this document says.
And so the question I intended to ask, and Keith corrected me there, is whether R.J. Reynolds had a policy of using personalities for product endorsements during this time period, if you know.
I have no idea.
That's not something you've investigated.
This is 33 years ago. I was a second lieutenant in the Army when this document was written. Brand new second lieutenant. I have no idea what the company was doing from a marketing standpoint in any way, or anything about the company in 1967.
All right, let's go down to, we'll skip one paragraph and go to the next paragraph. In both working and social situations, Negroes tend to gravitate to groups, and Negro men usually spend more time with their respective groups than the average white man, whether it be in bars, club meetings, on the street, or at their jobs. Within these groups, there are centers of influence, individuals who lead the others because they are A, they are more in the know, or B, they are more forceful. These are not leaders in the sense of being president of the PTA or a local civic organization, but might well be a barber, a numbers man, a bellhop, a bartender, or a taxi driver who likes to show how smart he is with his pals or associates. Some are established, quote, kingfishers, end quote, while others only work at it. Were you aware that R.J. Reynolds was using an ad agency that used this kind of approach to market cigarettes in 1967?
As I said previously and a few minutes ago, in 1967 I was in the Army. I knew nothing about what was going on here or what R.J. Reynolds was doing in terms of its products or its marketing in 1967.
And turning to page 3 of the document, under the paragraph that begins detailed recommendations, does the document report, it is proposed that a special effort be undertaken to sample Negro menthol smokers in a more selective program than currently exists. This effort would concentrate on sampling the, quote, communicators, end quote, within the Negro community, as represented by such traditionally outspoken groupings as barbers and barbershops, taxi cab drivers, bartenders and bars, shoe polishers, elevator operators, and so forth. Importantly, the effort would also include sampling of fraternal, business, social group meetings of the community lodges and clubs. Again, did you have any knowledge that R.J. Reynolds was using an advertising agency that recommended this kind of an approach to market to African Americans in 1967?
I was in the Army in 1967. I did not work for the company. I have no idea what R.J. Reynolds was doing 7 years before I joined the company with regard to its products or its marketing.
Are you aware of any documents at R.J. Reynolds which would suggest that they rejected this approach or reprimanded the agency for recommending this approach?
I have no idea what was going on in the company 7 years before I joined it.
Do you agree that the approach recommended in this letter is reprehensible?
I have no idea what's going on here. And for me to sit here 33 years later reading a couple paragraphs out of some memo that somebody wrote to Dancer Fitzgerald about what appears to be sampling, for me to render some sort of judgment as to whether or not this is a good idea, a bad idea, a reprehensible idea is totally inappropriate. I have no idea what these folks were doing or what the company did with this 33 years ago.
All right. Mark, that's Exhibit 5, I guess. You've been handed a document, Mr. Schindler, that's dated September 24th, 1975, marked RJR Confidential, from John G. Palmer, Marketing Research Department, to Mr. P.S. Ray, Jr. Ray, Salem, 1976, Strategic Planning. Are you familiar with this document?
I don't think so. I don't think I've seen it before.
Do you know Mr. Palmer or Mr. Ray?
Yeah, I knew John Palmer years ago. He worked in marketing research. I'm not sure who Mr. Ray is here.
Is Mr. Palmer retired or no longer with the company, to your knowledge?
Yes, he's no longer with the company, and I'm not sure when he left, but it's a long time ago.
Do you know if he's still alive?
I do not know.
Turn to page 3 of the document, if you will, please. Under item 4, quote, the street black, or the, quote, street, end quote, black, which discusses the objective to determine if we need to develop special marketing approaches to reach the downscale black. Do you know if during the 1975 time frame, R.J. Reynolds had a marketing program designed to reach the downscale black?
I have no idea.
Does the document further reflect we need to know if Salem among blacks is primarily a cigarette for middle-class blacks? If so, we might want to make special marketing efforts to better reach the downscale black.
What's the question?
That's an accurate rendition of what's in the document, is that correct?
That's what it says.
Do you consider it an appropriate marketing strategy for R.J. Reynolds to make special marketing efforts to reach the, quote, downscale black, end quote?
I don't know that this was, first of all, I don't know that this was a marketing strategy of the company. It says, if so, we might want to make special marketing efforts. So this is some idea that Mr. Palmer is recommending. It is not evident to me that this was ever acted upon. I certainly have no knowledge of it.
Do you think it's appropriate as a marketing strategy?
Well, if somebody came to me today and said, let's have a marketing effort for downscale blacks, it would not be considered appropriate. They would get some pretty negative comments coming back from me.
It wouldn't have been appropriate in 1976.
I have no idea. I
years
cannot, you're taking a paragraph out of a document implying that this was a company effort, which I have no idea if it was. This is an individual's opinion. You're implying this is the company's opinion. And what I see here is an opinion, a suggestion to pursue a certain path that I today would say I wouldn't do, but it doesn't in any way show me that the company did this. It shows me that John Palmer wrote this memo.
Are you aware of any documents or policy within the company as of 1975 that R.J. Reynolds would not attempt to market the, quote, downscale blacks?
I have no idea.
Would you agree that if there were such a policy to market to, quote, downscale blacks, end quote, that would have been inappropriate and wrong to do?
Objection.
I am not in opinion 25 years after this paragraph or this memo was written to judge the appropriateness of what somebody was doing 25 years ago or may have done or may not have done. I wouldn't do that today.
You were with the company in 1975, though, weren't you?
Yes.
In what position were you?
This is in September '75. I worked in R.J. Reynolds Industries in the corporate personnel group as an internal consultant. So I was not part of the tobacco company at that time. I was part of the parent company.
Do you have any reason to question the authenticity of that document?
No.
Mark this as the next exhibit, which I guess will be... I'm now handing you, Mr. Schindler, a document dated March the 6th, 1989, titled 1990 New Marketing Ideas, submitted by Advertising and Promotion Research. Have you seen this document before?
No, I don't believe I have.
If you can, turn to the Bates number 507297438. And does this describe a program for targeting well, it says for inner city black targeted brand?
Yes, that's the title of that section on that page.
And does it report that the objective of the program is to develop and introduce a distinctive cigarette brand targeted at the inner city black smoker?
That's what it says.
To your knowledge, did R.J. Reynolds have a marketing plan targeted toward the inner city black smoker in 1990?
Well, this says to introduce a distinctive cigarette brand. The only one I'm familiar with, which we had discussed earlier, was Uptown, which ultimately never made it even to test market.
Are you familiar with any marketing plan of R.J. Reynolds to target inner city white smokers in a similar fashion?
No.
or to target what was described in the prior document as downscale smokers? That is, are you familiar with any program of R.J. Reynolds to target downscale white smokers specifically?
Objection.
No, you've not shown me a document like that, nor do I know that in 1967 that the company had a marketing strategy for downscale African American smokers.
1975, I believe, is the date of exhibit number 5, which referred to the downscale black smoker. So are you familiar in 1975 whether Reynolds had a program to target downscale white smokers?
1975?
This is the prior document. I'm going back for a minute to the downscale issue.
Downscale wasn't in that one. It was in the 67 one, wasn't it? Am I mixed up?
No, you are mixed up.
No, it's possible. There's a lot of documents here. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Well, I don't know of any marketing plan in 1975 for downscale. That's the Palmer memo.
Correct.
Sorry, we made a recommendation. I don't know if the company at all operated on that notion.
Now, if you turn to, well, first stay on the same page for a minute. The proposed brand, it said, or this brand will leverage the black consumer's desire to use products which are distinctive and are associated primarily with blacks and are more, quote, potent, end quote. Parentheses, e.g., blacks drink malt liquor rather than beer, close parentheses. Was R.J. Reynolds at this time attempting to develop a cigarette that was, quote, more potent, end quote, for blacks?
Well, I don't know what potent means. The only thing that I can possibly relate, which I've mentioned here earlier, was, and you did, was the Uptown. I don't know what potent means. If it means more menthol, that may be what it means. I don't know what else potent would mean.
Could it refer to more tar?
No, I don't think so. I don't know what potent means.
Well, are you familiar with any plan by R.J. Reynolds in the 1990 time frame to market a more, quote, potent cigarette to white, specifically?
No, and I don't know about a marketing strategy to market a more potent cigarette to blacks or African Americans.
Turn to the following page, if you will. At the top of the page, does this document report that many inner city blacks open their packs from the bottom to keep the filter in from getting dirty when they/others remove a cigarette. Placing the cigarette upside down in the pack will be a unique feature which will demonstrate empathy toward the target and his unique behavior.
And this unique behavior.
I'm sorry, and this unique behavior. Did Reynolds develop a cigarette and a pack designed to be open with the filter end down for blacks?
I believe Uptown, which we've talked about numerous times here, was the cigarette in the pack, I believe, was configured that way. And recall that Uptown ultimately never made it to test market.
Are you familiar with any documents in the files of Reynolds suggesting that inner city whites open their packs to keep from the bottom to keep the filter in from getting dirty when they remove a cigarette?
No, I'm not.
Under rationale on the same page, does the document report that blacks are most effectively reached through outdoor advertising due to their low involvement with other media forms?
Yeah, that's what it says.
What does that mean to you?
What this says is, according to whoever wrote this, I don't know how accurate this is, it says what it says. Blacks are most effectively reached through outdoor advertising due to their low involvement with other media forms. It says If you want to advertise the blacks, according to whoever wrote this, that they will pay attention to a billboard, but they don't read magazines, I guess, is what that means.
Do you know what R.J. Reynolds' advertising budget was in this time frame
No
for
idea.
outdoor advertising in African American communities?
I have no idea.
Would you have that information for any year? That is, the amount of money R.J. Reynolds spent for outdoor advertising of cigarettes in African American communities?
I don't know. I don't know if the data is separated that way.
Well, do you know the number, or do you have
No, I
the number in
don't.
mind?
I have
Okay.
no idea.
Now, the description of this proposed brand was to be Fat Boys. Do you see that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Was this, in fact, the forerunner of the Uptown cigarette?
Objection.
I don't know. I mean, my opinion is, by looking through some of these paragraphs, and the timing of, apparently the time of this memo sounds like it may have been, but I do not know for a fact, since I was not, directly part of marketing or part of this project.
Did the Uptown cigarette have the highest tar and nicotine of any cigarette that Reynolds marketed other than unfiltered Camels? Realizing Uptown was never marketed as such, but was that the proposal?
I do not know.
Would you consider a cigarette having 19 milligrams of tar in 1990 to be classified as a high tar cigarette?
Yes, it'd be on the upper range of the tar, I believe. Not the highest tar, I don't think, back then.
Let's mark this as the next exhibit. I think it'll be 7. Mr. Schindler, I've handed you a document dated U.S. cigarette market in the 1990s, dated June 21st, 1990. Are you familiar with this document?
No, I'm not.
Could you turn to Bates number, I'll give you the last 4, 8141. It's toward the front,
Oh.
just a few pages into it.
8?
8141.
Oh, 8 more. Yes.
Does this appear to be a document prepared by the marketing department of R.J. Reynolds?
Rick, you asking about this page or the whole document?
The whole document. And then I'm sorry, I'll go to the page then.
It looks like a document prepared by marketing research.
Of R.J. Reynolds.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I think of it.
You see a stamp on the document that it was produced,
Yes.
I believe, in the Minnesota case.
Right.
Okay. So with that, seeing that stamp, does that appear to you to validate this as a authentic document that was prepared by the marketing department of R.J. Reynolds?
Well, objection. It clearly was produced by Reynolds. Are you asking him whether that means that it was prepared by Reynolds marketing as opposed to some outside group and was then part of the Reynolds files?
That's the first question, yes. Do you know that? Good question by Keith there. He's on his toes.
Well, I don't know who prepared it. The company stamped it and gave it to you guys as being in our files, but I'm looking through here and there's not an author or
From your
There's a lot
familiarity,
of stuff about Camel and Marlboro and different things, so.
from your familiarity with the way documents were prepared by the marketing department, doesn't this appear to be a document that was prepared by the Reynolds marketing department?
I mean, it looks like something that could have been prepared by a marketing research group.
Within Reynolds, is what I'm asking now.
Yes, but it could have been somebody who prepared it for them. I just don't know. I mean, there's no author that I can see.
All right, well, go to page 8141 that we started on a few minutes ago. Does this document reflect that cigarettes are the most brand loyal category in the U.S.?
That's what it says.
And that compared to other products in this chart on the right-hand side of the page, such as toothpaste or beer or shampoo or soft drinks, that cigarettes appear to be more brand loyal than those other types of products.
That's what this says.
And it says our customers are much more likely to exclusively adopt one brand. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what the document says.
And if you turn to the next page, does it reflect that with respect to the U.S. cigarette market and fundamental dynamics, that the category rarely attracts new users over the age of 24? The majority become regular smokers before age 18, but are, quote, new, end quote, to our 18-plus market at age 18.
That's what it says.
And from your knowledge of R.J. Reynolds and the marketing information obtained by R.J. Reynolds, do you agree that, in fact, smokers are rarely attracted to smoking after the age of 24?
Well, you're saying based on data obtained by R.J. Reynolds.
Yes.
And I hope you're not suggesting that we did special research. My understanding of that data, as we've talked about earlier,
Yes.
is that it's government studies that go on that are available to the public, talk about the greatest percentage of people begin smoking before age 18 and that type of thing. And I would, again, I'd have to assume here, because I don't, I just now saw this document, that they're referring to that kind of data.
Well,
Not some sort of independent research on underage smokers.
Are you suggesting that Reynolds did not, in fact, have its own data that it researched and generated indicating to Reynolds the age at which most people start to smoke, or the age by which most people start to smoke?
I don't know of any research that the company's done on, certainly in my tenure here as CEO of the company, we don't do research on our own research on underage smokers. So I don't know what the source of this data is. What?
The document further reflects on this page that any brand which appeals to adult smokers ages 18 to 24 establishes a preemptive brand loyalty. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
Despite the small size of this group, any brand which appeals to adults. I'm just trying to read this to myself. All right. Despite the small size of this group, any brand which appeals to adult smokers 18 to 24 establishes a preemptive brand loyalty. What does that mean? Any brand which appeals to adult smokers. I guess, you asked me if I agree with that?
Correct.
I don't know if I agree with that or not. It suggests, I think, it's a strange wording, establishes preemptive brand loyalty. I'm assuming that the author meant that if somebody adopts your brand between age 18 and 24, they'll be loyal to the brand going on in time.
And does, in fact, the next sentence suggest that this loyalty will benefit the brand for 7 years on average, perhaps for a lifetime?
And what's your question?
Is that a follow-up to what you just said, confirming what you just indicated appeared to be the purpose or the intent of the document?
Objection.
I don't understand your question. If we could do that
All
again.
right, let's start over. I thought you agreed, and if you didn't, tell me. that a brand which appeals to adult smokers ages 18 to 24 establishes a preemptive brand loyalty?
I don't know what the author had in mind by preemptive brand loyalty. That is a very subjective word. Okay, so I can neither agree or disagree. You go find me the author and then we can sit down and have an interesting discussion with the person about preemptive brand loyalty.
So you don't know that?
No, I don't know that because I don't know exactly what they meant by preemptive brand loyalty.
All right, turn to the next page, if you will. Again, talking about the fundamental dynamics of the cigarette market in the 1990s. Does this document indicate that 4 to 8% of smokers switch brands per year?
That's what it says.
And is that in accord with your experience?
I've not thought of it that way. In 1989, about, I guess, the savings segment of the business probably had 12, 13, 14% share. 3 years later, had 36% of the market. That means, and these are new brands, primarily. So you had a 20-some point share shift in about a 3 or so year period.
And during what period of time?
From around late 80s to 1992, which ultimately, so you have a savings segment that more than doubled in a 3-year period. So that says to me that preemptive brand loyalty and marginal switching, or whatever this means, certainly was challenged during that period of tremendous switching into brands that didn't even exist before they landed on the market. So there's these theories about this being the most loyal category. It's a very loyal brand category, but over the last 10 years or so, there's been tremendous switching that has gone on in this industry as one has witnessed the growth of the savings business in a relatively short period of time. And that seems inconsistent with some of these points of view that people had back in 1990 or whenever this was done.
You would agree there could be switching among brands within a company,
Oh, sure.
and you would count that as switching as well. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes.
All right.
I mean, you're talking about brands here, you're not talking about company loyalty,
Yes.
you're talking about brand loyalty.
Now, does the next sentence indicate that much of this switching tends to be random noise with little net effect on shares for most brands?
I think that is proven to be absolutely wrong.
Nevertheless, that's what's reported in the document.
Yeah, as wrong as it is.
Now, let's go to the next page for a minute. Does this indicate, again talking about the dynamics,
Make sure we're on the right page.
Okay.
Okay, one with the little barcode.
8144.
Okay, got it.
since most quitting is temporary, the net effect of quitting in the 1980s was to reduce the number of smokers over age 25 by about 2 to 3% per year. My question is, having read that to you, I read it correctly. Is that correct?
That's what it says.
Is the experience of R.J. Reynolds in accord with this? That is, that the net effect on quitting is about 2 to 3% of smokers per year.
I don't know. I've not run numbers like that. I do know that since most quitting is temporary, well, in 1982 the company sold about 200 billion cigarettes, and this year will be between, a little above 90 billion. So our volume 18 years ago was more than twice as high as it is now. The industry went from over 600 billion cigarettes down to 400 and some billion last year and this year. So it seems to me that the comment that most quitting is temporary seems to me to be proven wrong in the performance of this industry's volume over time. There are 40-some million people that have quit smoking. The volume has declined dramatically, and that's a function of quitting and a function of people not starting to smoke.
Isn't it also a function of people dying from cigarette-related disease?
Objection.
Look, I agree that this product is risky. We've talked about that before. But you're talking about volume trends here,
Right,
okay?
right.
And this says, the document you handed me that I've never seen before, most quitting is temporary. And I'm telling you that the volume performance of this industry counters whatever anybody was thinking when they wrote that.
Is it your testimony then that the reduction in volume, I apologize if I cut you off.
Furthermore, I'm giving you absolute reductions. And they're reductions that don't account for population growth over that time. These are just straight up reductions in volume, 30-some% for the industry. We sold twice as many cigarettes 18 years ago. I mean, this data is all over the place that people quit and people don't start in this category.
So is it your
It doesn't appear to be temporary.
Is it your testimony then that the reduction in volume can be solely accounted for by those who quit smoking?
I said to you it's a function of quitting and less people starting to smoke.
And I ask you if you would be willing to add to that and people dying who smoke from smoking-related disease.
Objection.
No, I wouldn't be willing to add that to it.
You don't think that happens?
I think that people who smoke have a significant increased risk of disease. And some people may have their disease develop as a function of smoking. They are aware of that, and we continue to work on how to reduce the risk of this product. But the volume declines that you are pointing out to, or this quitting temporary nature of it that you're pointing out in this document, I'm simply trying to point out to you, is a function of quitting being something other than just temporary, and obviously less people starting to smoke. How else could the volume come down?
Are you through?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to page 8156. Bottom of the page. Does the document reflect that brand positionings must tap into values and mindsets consistent with a more beleaguered smoking population and one that is increasingly blue-collar / ethnic / less educated? Marketing tactics must also be in tune with this changing smoking population.
You're asking me, is that what?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what's written here.
And has it been Reynolds' experience that, in fact, since even before 1990 and continuing through today, that the smoking population has become increasingly blue-collar, ethnic, and less educated?
Objection.
I mean, the smoking population consists of people of, different demographic makeups, both in education, both in income. I believe most people would say that it skews somewhat to lower education and lower income, but they're all demographic groups with regard to age and education. I mean, education and income that are involved in the smoking behavior.
Would you agree that the prediction that smokers would increasingly become a blue-collar, ethnic, less educated group has in fact proven to be true?
I don't know if that's true or not.
That's not something you've discussed with your marketing people?
You're asking me to reconcile a statistical question with a written paragraph somewhere whenever this whole thing was put together in, I guess, 1990 or 89 or something with statistics today, and I've not done that.
In other words, your marketing people haven't told you that we have found people who are smoking now are more blue-collar than they used to be, more blue-collar people in the market as compared to white-collar.
Well, I just said that the category skews to, less education and less income, but there are demographic representation in every direction with regard to the category.
it's skewing more in the direction of blue collar, less
Then when this
educated.
document was written?
Yes.
I don't know that.
That's not something you've tried to find out.
No, I just saw this document.
Well, regardless of when you saw the document, wouldn't you be interested in knowing where your customers come from? What population groups, what income groups, what education groups? for
We
example?
deal with this business from the standpoint that there's a certain amount of volume, and certain trends on the brands, and we try to compete in that market to try and hold on to our franchise smokers, those who choose to continue to smoke, and to go after competitor brands like Marlboro. And that's the way we approach this.
Is it true that in the year 1998, the cigarette industry domestically spent $6.7 billion on marketing and promotion?
I'm not sure of the total industry number.
Have you seen the report from the Federal Trade Commission?
I've not personally read the report from the Federal Trade Commission.
Does that figure sound roughly familiar to you?
Yes.
That would be in the ballpark, 6.7 billion?
It might be. A lot of those dollars, a huge amount of those dollars have to do with pricing.
This is the only copy I have because I've printed it off the internet. But are you familiar with this document called Federal Trade Commission Report to Congress for 1998?
I've not seen it.
Do you know that that's something that's regularly
Yes.
prepared and presented by the Federal Trade Commission on a regular basis?
Right.
Rick, are you proposing to mark that as an exhibit?
I can. We can make another copy, and I'll be glad to do that.
It's up to you. I was just trying to, didn't know where we were going with it. But
Let me ask you if maybe we can short circuit this, Mr. Schindler. Do you see domestic advertising and promotion expenditures for the year 1998 showing $6.7 billion there?
for purposes of the written record, let me indicate that what Rick has done is open the document that you were previously describing to a certain page and pointed to certain numbers on the page.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it says.
And does that sound generally correct to you?
I'm just looking at all the items they have listed. Yeah, it probably is generally correct.
What proportion of that $6.7 billion was spent by Reynolds?
This is 1998, right?
Correct.
In 1998, it's probably about 1.5 billion, of which, yeah, we were in a big transition period over a couple years because of all the price increases that were taking place and the amount of dollars that were manifesting themselves in discounts at retail, which is just pricing, all of which is, I think, included here. So we're probably in a total number of marketing to include advertising, which is in 1998 was probably about 135 million, with a total marketing budget of probably about 1.5 billion.
1.5 billion.
Yeah, the vast majority of that discounting.
Is it true, Mr. Schindler, and you can look at the document if you like, that the figure of $6.7 billion for the year 1998 was the highest expenditure by the cigarette industry domestically for advertising and promotion that there's ever been?
Well, you're exaggerating by saying advertising. This is not $6.7 billion worth of advertising. There are two line items in here, just by the way they've categorized it, represent $2 billion of this just on retail value-added coupons, discounting kinds of things. Promotional allowances, $2.8 billion. So it's incorrect to surmise that the majority of the $6.7 billion somehow is advertising. I told you that our advertising dollars in '98 were about 150 million or so.
Is it correct that the total domestic advertising and promotional expenditures by the tobacco industry in the U.S. was $6.7 billion for 1998.
It is correct that that document has that as a heading. It is not correct to suggest in any way that the advertising in this product consumed on a national basis the greater percentage of $6.7 billion. That is not correct. To make that, to allude to that, which I believe is what you're doing.
I believe I said advertising and promotion, didn't I?
That is the heading on there. You need to get into the line items.
The total $6.7 billion in
The
India.
total, everything, promotions, discounts, advertising, whatever.
And Reynolds' share of that's roughly $1.5 billion.
Yeah, might be off a little, but that's about right.
And is that the highest figure of the domestic cigarette advertising and promotion expenditures? In other words, is 1998 the highest sum that's ever been recorded by the Federal Trade Commission for those expenditures?
I don't know.
Would you like to look at the document and confirm that?
So the record's clear, I object. Are you asking him to confirm by reading something from the documents?
There's I believe you will see there, Mr. Schindler, that the advertising and promotional expenditures are set forth on a yearly basis going back into the 1970s. And from what I could tell in looking at it, the $6.7 billion figure was the highest that's ever recorded. And I'm asking you if you agree with that.
I said I didn't know. I mean, and I don't see on this page where I can reconcile that.
Are you familiar with this kind of report that's done on a
I have
regular
not looked at
basis?
the report. I know the FTC publishes that report.
Or do you see starting on page 13 they have the figures starting for the year 1970? Upper
I can't see
left-hand
it from
corner.
here. I need to get a little closer.
Back to what you asked me about earlier, Rick, I think we probably better at some point mark this as an
Okay.
exhibit,
I'll
since
do
there's so
that.
many questions on it.
I'll do it.
Okay, so
The question is, according to the Federal Trade Commission, is the $6.7 billion figure for 1998 the highest that they ever reported for promotional and advertising expenditures by the domestic tobacco companies?
if they say it is, then I would assume the FTC is saying that correctly, since they put the report together.
Do you know what the figures would be for 1999?
For the industry?
Yes.
No.
Would you mark that as the next exhibit then, Candace? And we'll just substitute a copy,
That'd be fine.
because I'm sure you don't want this one marked in the record like that.
Probably not. You owe me one.
What was the exhibit?
Which number? That's number 8. This one.
We've done the same thing on a couple of exhibits that we've used.
Mark that as Exhibit 9, if you will.
What'd you say? Yes.
Mr. Schindler, I've handed you what's been marked as Exhibit 9, titled Black Opportunity Analysis. And I'll ask you if you are familiar with that document.
No, I don't recall seeing this before.
From looking through the document, are you able to determine whether this is an RJR document?
Objection, Rick. I'm not trying to draw too fine a line, but when you say an RJR document, you mean one that may have been in the files of RJR or one that was actually put together by RJR?
Let's start first for a document in the files of RJR.
This is a document prepared by RJR.
I can't, but the others would have RJR stamped on it. I might have missed it, but I don't.
If you want to look at any of these books, read this, read it.
Looking at the
Oh,
way,
here's one. It says black smokers have been identified as a potential opportunity sector.
You need to read it loud enough that
Oh.
it gets picked up by the court reporter.
Okay, I'm sorry. On 5253, it says black smokers have been identified as a potential opportunity sector for RJR.
based upon what you know about marketing documents and the way they're prepared at the company, does this appear to be a document that was prepared by the R.J. Reynolds marketing department?
I have not looked through this document. It apparently was in our files. That's where you all got it from. But as to whether or not RJR Marketing prepared this or somebody else prepared it, I don't know.
Would it be fair to conclude that it was either prepared internally for RJR or externally and given to RJR for marketing purposes?
Objection.
I don't know who put this together. I don't know when they put it together. It's hard for me to, what I guess I sort of know by everybody here is that it was in our files, but I don't know who did this. I don't know if it was a marketing group, I don't know if it was an outside agency, I don't know who put this together.
Can you tell me whether this appears to be in a format that is used by your marketing group and would, on its face, by the way in which it's put together, the typing, the format, and so forth, that it appears to be a document prepared by R.J. Reynolds internally?
It has stuff in here about comparing brands and different things like that, and that, is the kind of thing marketing folks do. But given that I have no knowledge of this document, never seen it till we came in here, and it doesn't have an author, which a lot of times these documents will have authors, and many times I'll at least know the author. I can't go much beyond, yeah, it looks like something that marketing people do or have done, but beyond that, I can't really comment on it.
All right, look at Bates number 5259. Do you see that?
Yes. Is this black opportunity analysis?
Correct. And under item 2, does it report that RJR's SOS, and what does that mean?
Share of smokers, I think, is what they mean.
Among blacks is flat at about 32%.
That's what it says.
Would that be in line with what information you may have about the share of smokers among blacks that RJR has?
I do not know what our share of smoker among blacks is. And I have no idea, of the accuracy of this, given I don't even know when this was done or who did it.
Now, turn, if you will, to Bates number 5272. Again, further discussing black opportunity analysis. And at the top of the page, this document report that fortunately for the industry, this health concern does not translate strongly to anti-smoking attitudes, although blacks are aware of such attitude among, quote, others, end quote. Is that what it says?
Yes, that's what it said.
Do you agree that it would be fortunate for the industry, for any group, black or any other ethnic group, to have anti-smoking attitudes which did not, to have health concerns which did not translate strongly to anti-smoking attitudes?
Everybody has health concerns as it relates to smoking.
You agree it's fortunate for the industry if health concerns don't translate to anti-smoking attitudes?
Everybody has health concerns about smoking. The notion of be fortunate if people didn't has never crossed my mind.
Would you mind just answering the question, Mr. Schindler? I'm not trying
I'm
to be
not sure I know what the
disrespectful.
question is.
Do you agree that it's fortunate for the industry if it's true that a health concern would not translate to an anti-smoking attitude?
It is such a theoretical proposition, I can't answer it. Everybody has concerns about the risk of smoking. I don't know anybody or any group that is not concerned about the risk of smoking. And that is the reality I deal with. They're a legal product with significant health risk, and how do you function as a business in that context in a responsible and ethical manner, which is what I believe this company does.
Do you know if Reynolds has ever attempted to find out which ethnic groups have less anti-smoking health concerns than others?
I don't have any knowledge of the company trying to find out which group may or may not have less concerns about smoking.
Rick, let me suggest, I haven't checked exactly, but it's close to an hour, and I wonder if we took about a 10-minute break and want to go then to about 12:20 or 12:30 and break for lunch might be a way to proceed if that works for you.
Okay.
We're going off the record at 11:24 a.m. The end of the